This is the kickoff of our community panel discussion series for Week Without Driving. Today's event is being hosted by the Greater Madison MPO, the Capital Area Regional Planning Commission, UW-Madison Transportation Services, and AARP Wisconsin. So thank you all for being here, and hello to everyone who's joining us online as well. So I wanted to start off by sharing a little bit about the Week Without Driving, which is why we're all here today. Week Without Driving is a nationwide initiative that was started in 2021 by disability rights advocate and author Anna Zivarts in Washington State. The goal of the week is to raise awareness about the barriers that non-drivers face every day by inviting community members who typically drive, and particularly those who influence our transportation system, so elected officials, planners, and other decision makers, to take time to experience getting or trying to get where they need to go without their personal vehicle. And so understanding it from the perspective of a non-driver. Of course, we know non-drivers in our community include seniors, youth, people with disabilities, people with low incomes, and people who choose not to drive for a variety of personal reasons. And in Dane County, non-drivers make up 30 to 40% of our population. This is the second year that the Greater Madison MPO has led efforts to recognize Week Without Driving in Dane County, and we absolutely couldn't do it alone. So we'd like to extend a huge thanks to all of the partners who've been working with us to make this happen. You can see all the logos here. I would especially like to thank AARP Wisconsin for donating 25 copies of Anna Zivarts' book so that folks could read that in preparation for these events. Thanking the libraries in Madison, Fitchburg, and Sun Prairie for making those books available. They're such a resource in our community. And then all of the nonprofit partners who have been participating in planning calls for the, oh no. Okay. 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 Welcome. Are you doing okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Welcome. And then in addition to all of our organizational partners, we have 6 area communities who have adopted resolutions or issued proclamations or otherwise publicly recognized Week Without Driving. So we would really like to thank them for their leadership and for helping us get the word out about this important initiative. In addition to these communities, we'd like to thank Dane County Supervisor Rochelle Andre. She has been very vocal about this week and is participating. And then also Senator Melissa Ratcliffe, her office issued a citation of commendation recognizing Week Without Driving statewide and recognizing all of the partners. So we're doing our work here in Dane County, but there are partners in other regions of the state doing similar Week Without Driving initiatives. And so she was recognizing everyone for the great work that they're doing. So a quick overview of our plan for today. We have a couple of welcomes and introductions. We will share a welcome video that author Anna Zivarts put together for us to kick off these events. We will have about an hour for the panel discussion and Q&A. We'll be moderating Q&A from the audience here as well as the audience online. You may have picked up a slip that you can write a question on and hand it to us or put it in the box that's to the back on my right on the table in the back, and we'll read those questions. You can also just, when we get to the Q&A, feel free to stand up as we go around and ask your question. And then just a quick wrap up at the end. So with that, I am going to hand it off to Alex Andros, who's the Executive Director of the Greater Madison MPO, to welcome everyone. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Tia. Hello, everyone. My name is Alexander Andros, and I am the director of something called the Greater Madison MPO. So show of hands, anyone know what that is? Wow. Okay, this is a primo group. But most people, transportation planners, government, especially transportation. lots of acronyms. So what is an MPO? So I'm going to read you the little spiel for those who may not be familiar. We're a federally designated agency responsible for coordinating regional transportation in the area. So we're contained within Dane County. We ensure that transportation investments align with broader regional priorities, and we do a lot of planning and great events like this. Because transportation, as we think about it over the years, we've got this tremendous system that was built, it was expanded, it was about capacity, like feats of engineering, connecting all regions of the country. However, we also need to turn and think about people and where they live and how they need, who they are and how are they going to get to where they need to go. So that's where a lot of things really come together. Our planning, our engineering, our all sorts of things. And a lot of it is just the mindset. And what I think is really great about the Week Without Driving is that it's a really great way to, you can read about something, you can understand it, you can be concerned about it, but to go out and experience it is a whole nother thing. So I would just encourage everyone to do that. A week is wonderful, but any amount you can to do that and to really think about it firsthand in your experience, but give you a new perspective on the experience of others. If you think about how we make choices, do we need to ask for a ride? How much time do we need to plan? I myself didn't plan super well because I needed more time because I was slower on my bike than I thought I would be. But I'm so grateful and blessed that I can ride my bike. I have the ability and I'm economically able to own and drive a car and ride a bike. And I live in a city like Madison where I can also get to transit. But that's what we want for everyone in our region. So I welcome you all here. I'm glad to see you. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation and the whole notion of the book club. And I'm going to introduce to you our moderator, Bill Tishler, who is sort of the master of the book club, I have to say. You're very good at this. So Bill Tishler is a longtime Madison resident, educator, and public servant with over 3 decades of professional experience in higher education and public service. He holds joint appointments at UW-Madison, serving as an IT specialist with Division of Information Technology, and as a senior instructional media producer with the Division of Continuing Studies. In addition to this university work, he serves on the countywide Capital Area Regional Planning Commission, another acronym, CARPC. They're kind of our sister regional planning organization. And he's also an alder for Madison's District 11 on the Madison Common Council. His priorities include strengthening infrastructure, improving pedestrian and bicycle safety, advancing environmental stewardship, and ensuring that city government remains transparent and accessible to all residents. He's deeply engaged in community life. He hosts District 11 discussions as open forums for residents and leads the District 11 book club discussions, which brings neighbors together to explore ideas, share perspectives, and connect with local leaders around important issues facing Madison, much like we're doing today. Each session features a selected book or reading that sparks conversation, often paired with guest speakers such as city staff, community experts, or authors who provide additional insights. And that's what we're going to do today. And this book really offers great insights. And Bill, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Oh, well, thank you. And since you mentioned the District 11 Book Club, we are going to be doing a book club event on October 22nd on the book, The Color of Love. We're going to be tying in with the county-wide effort to look at racial kind of covenants. And so I have a really good panel lined up. But we are here today, and I want to thank everybody for joining us today for a discussion to kind of kick off the Week Without Driving. As you heard, my name is Bill Tishler. I'll be moderating the discussion today. Today, we're going to be exploring what it means to navigate our community as a non-driver, challenges that people face, and how planning decisions can create a more inclusive system for everybody. When I was reading this book, one of the statistics, about 1/3 of our population doesn't drive, kind of stuck out to me. But then I was kind of thinking about my immediate family here in Madison, and I have my father who's turning 90, and he stopped driving a number of years ago. My wife wears glasses. She has low vision. She is not very good at, she gave me permission to say this publicly, but she has a very difficult time kind of judging how fast cars are coming towards her. So she has a driver's license, but she chooses not to drive. And then I have my youngest son is 14, and I have two other kids who do drive, and then my mother's still driving, even though she's in her 80s. But my family represents that statistic. So that really. So when I saw that number, I was like, yeah, that really is a accurate number there. So we have a really good panel with us today, and I'm sure all of you came to hear them, not me, talk. And what I'm going to do is we're going to begin by showing a short video with the author, and then we're going to bring up each of our panelists, and we're going to have about a 45-minute conversation, and then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. But I want to just introduce our panelists first before we show the video. Yeah, there we go. Our first panelist is Denise Jess, who brings 4 decades of experience to her leadership and advocacy role to promote the dignity and empowerment of people with vision loss and other disabilities. Denise is the executive director of the Wisconsin Council of the Blind and Visually Impaired. She advocates for the rights of Wisconsin's approximately 2 million non-drivers. Denise, who is legally blind, knows the everyday challenges faced by those who cannot choose not to drive. She advocates at the national, state, and local level, including serving as co-chair on Wisconsin Non-Driver Advisory Committee, the City of Madison Transportation Commission, and the Aging and Vision Loss National Coalition's Transportation Working Group. She also served on the Vision Zero Task Force and the Madison Metro Transit Redesign Task Force. Our next panelist is new to the City of Madison, but already knows his way around the city by both bus and bike. Christof Spieler is an engineer and planner. He serves as our new transportation director for the City of Madison. He's also responsible, in that job, he's responsible for traffic engineering, parking, transit, transportation planning. His previous work was as a planner in Houston, where he worked with cities and agencies all across the United States. He also taught at Rice University and served on the board of Houston's Metro. Christof is also an author. His first book, Trains, Buses, People, was published in 2018 by Island Press, the same as the book that we're reading today. His new book, Transportation and the Shape of Cities, is coming out soon in 2026. It could be the next book that we read for the Week Without Driving, so we'll see. Our next panelist is Caryn Walline. Did I get it right?
Correct.
Caryn.
Yeah.
Caryn, there we go. Caryn Walline. Caryn is the director of parking operations here at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where she leads efforts to align parking policy with the university's sustainability and mobility goals. She brings to the UW more than 16 years of experience in municipal and university transportation, having previously served as the Deputy Director of Communications and Public Engagement at the Seattle Department of Transportation, leading public engagement for the city's Vision Zero safety initiatives and efforts to expand sidewalks and bike infrastructure. She holds a master's degree in sustainability and sustainable transportation, and is committed to building equitable, multimodal systems that reduce car dependencies and improve access for everyone, including those who cannot and choose not to drive. Our next panelist is Darrin Wasniewski. Okay, all right. We were talking about earlier, but Darrin is a Senior Associate State Director of Community Outreach for AARP, where he champions livable, walkable communities for people of all ages and ability. With a background in urban design, community development, and Main Street revitalization, Darrin brings a deep understanding of how thoughtful planning can support aging in place, social connection, and mobility, especially for those, again, who don't drive or choose not to drive. Darrin is a former City of Madison Transportation Commissioner, and he now serves on the City of Madison's Planning Commission. So I just want to thank all of you for joining us. So next we're going to go to the video, and as we're showing the video, we will then ask our panelists to come up and have a seat.
Greetings, Madison and Dane County friends. This is Anna Zivarts calling to you from Seattle, Washington, where I live, and really excited to be here with you all today in this video recording to celebrate Week Without Driving and to help give you a little context about non-drivers and who we are and why this is an important concept and how it can be a useful way to help us think about how we build more inclusive communities where all of us can get where we need to go and can fully participate. So first of all, just to give you a sense of what is a non-driver and where this came from. So I'm a non-driver. I am born with an eye condition. It's a neurological condition. That means that it's not safe for me to drive. And working in the disability community, I started to meet many other non-drivers as well. And that started to broaden my sense of, not feeling so alone, not feeling as isolated as I had growing up in a rural area, starting to realize that maybe, there's a lot more of us who can't drive than I think we think about. There's just this assumption, in popular culture and in the media, right, that if you're an adult in America, you drive, and driving is how people get around. But the reality is, for almost a third of us, that's not a reality. That's not possible, either because of age, because of disability, because of income, because we don't have a valid license. And so we need to start thinking about how we can build communities that work better for everyone, right? Where driving isn't a prerequisite to getting your basic needs met. And that, so really it's my own personal experience, right, as someone with a disability that drove me to write a book about driving and car dependency. It's called When Driving Isn't an Option, Steering Away from Car Dependency. It was published in 2024 by Island Press. And what I hope folks get from this book really is that, first of all, that non-drivers exist. And second of all, that there's a lot of expertise and knowledge that comes from listening to the community members in your own communities who can't drive and can't afford to drive. Or perhaps the folks who choose not to drive too, right? And listening to how, what are the things that are working well and what are the things that are working less well? What are the things that we could build on and improve to make access more possible? So one thing you all can do, first of all, is just think about for a second who you know in your own communities, in your life. Maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a neighbor, maybe it's someone in a church or a community group, someone you go to school with. Maybe it's you. What is their experience of not being able to drive, and how do they get around? And then, you can ask them too next time you chat. And if you are able to participate in Week Without Driving, taking that reflection and that knowledge with you to think about, okay, well, if you suddenly didn't have the option of driving for whatever reason, how would you get your daily needs met? How would you get kids to sports practice? How would you get to that doctor's appointment? How would you get groceries and dog food and do all the other things that you need and want to do to fully participate in your community life? So thanks again for inviting me, and I have to say, just shout out for all the work that is happening in Madison and Dane County already. I was there, in the spring of 2024 for a bike ped safety event, and was super impressed by the bike infrastructure, so much so that I actually started looking at housing listings and showing them to my husband and being like, hey, we should move to Madison. So I know you're doing a lot of things right. Keep up the good work, and thanks again for inviting me to speak with you.
Okay, and we're back. I'm starting to do more radio programming. I'm kind of doing some stuff on WRT, which this actually might be a great program sometime in the near future. I want to just kind of start off by kind of going through the panel here and kind of getting your reactions to the video we just watched. What stood out to you, and what are some of the takeaways you would like the audience to take with them from today's panel? And why don't you begin?
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Walline. I think for me, the biggest thing that I pulled from this video is just, it's really striking that number of non-drivers, 1/3 of our community generally. And I think through my career, as I've had the opportunity to work for a transit agency for the city of Seattle and also for a number of universities, being able to really think about that in the work that I do as I'm thinking about how am I developing policies, how am I developing programming. That's been really key to that work. A lot of my work has been in community engagement and public engagement. And one of the things I've always tried to do is really ensure that I'm including the voices of non-drivers in the conversations that we're having. It struck me as one of the first experiences I had working for a transit agency, being in a discussion where somebody was a non-driver and we were talking about actually restructuring our network in a way that was not going to really suit them moving forward. And so we're talking about other opportunities like access, paratransit, how that could potentially work for them, and really being able to hear their story of how that, while still great options available, really limited the convenient opportunities that they had to get around to their job, to grocery stores, that kind of thing. And that was really my first experience hearing that, where there were options available, but they weren't as good of options for them. And so as I was thinking through that, that was really something that stuck with me as I moved forward in my career. And so that's been a big part. I have the opportunity in the city of Seattle to actually participate in Week Without Driving. The last 2 years, once when I was with the University of Washington, and then also when I was with the city of Seattle. And a big part of that work was bringing in our leaders to participate in that, asking them not to drive and experience what the people in our community were experiencing, trying to get to our campus or get through downtown. And we had a lot of people participate, and it was really eye-opening for them in that experience. And so, you know, as a takeaway for this experience, trying to get leaders within organizations, institutions, as well as our elected officials to participate so they can really experience what that is in person.
Darrin, why don't you go next?
Thank you. Darrin Wasniewski with AARP Wisconsin. For me, one of the connections I made was just the thought process. I can't tell you how pained I was this morning trying to figure out how I was going to get here today. Knowing that I'm representing AARP Wisconsin, so I have a certain way that I would normally dress when I'm dressed in professional, not as casual as this. But we all know it's warm outside. And I thought, well, if I dress warm, then I could drive and I could be in air conditioning. But that would kind of defeat the purpose of the whole discussion that we're doing today. I could take the bus, which is a little over a half mile from my house. Still a little warm, but we could do it. But that runs every hour on the weekend on my line. Not so convenient for me trying to make timetables here. Or I could bike, and I had all of those options at my disposal. And, you know, just thinking about that, obviously I chose biking and the dress way more casually than I normally would. But that just seemed the best option. And I recognize how lucky I am to have those choices in what we do. But it also begins to inform my work in working with older adults around the state, to encourage them to begin thinking about this. That if they're not in a position, if they do have choices right now and are still able to drive, what is life going to be like when you're not able to safely drive? We know that the typical American outlives their ability to safely drive by 8 to 10 years. So what does your life look like when driving is no longer an option? And how connected can you be to your community? And so that's when Anna talked about those choices and how you get to the grocery store and go buy your dog food and all of that. You know, just my simple conundrum this morning of how I dress and how I'm getting here just really highlighted to me just being able to go through that thought process with somebody who has a plethora of options, and many people don't have those options.
Yeah, Christof, go ahead.
I mean, I think the thing that stuck out to me is the word all in all your daily needs, because I've lived a life in which I don't need to drive a lot. My typical daily commute is by bus or by bike. I'm able to run a whole lot of errands. I'm able to make it to meetings. But my wife and I do share a car, and I also have the financial means to other alternatives. So I remember, for example, the first time I ever arrived in Madison, I land at the airport, and whenever I fly to a new city, I'm always taking transit. I get there, and the next bus is 50 minutes away. The light is fading. I want to see the city I haven't seen before, and so I called a Lyft. The fact that I had that option made my day very different than if I was somebody who didn't have that option. And often the hardest part of what we do here is actually those outliers. It's often quite easy to deal with 90% of your life needs without getting in a car, but getting to 100% is often quite hard. And I am very glad that a lot of our policymakers are people who regularly use non-driving modes. But I also think we have to remember what it really feels like not to have that backup, not to have another option, to actually be faced with the choice of not doing something because there's simply no way to get there. And I think that's a really important reminder for all of us.
Well, I am a non-driver all the time. So Denise, Jess, Executive Director, Wisconsin Council of the Blind and Visually Impaired, and I work with non-drivers around the state. Anna's piece, just, it's speaking truth, every bit of it. I've had the privilege of talking and working with her and being interviewed for the book, and there's just something very synergistic when those of us who share that lived experience of non-driving can be together. It's like you come out of a place of isolation where often if you're explaining the situation to folks who are drivers, they kind of look at you in wide-eyed wonder, you know, and so to be with people who get it is exactly the energy that's needed to keep doing the work. So very grateful to her for choosing to put the book together and speaking so eloquently about it. As one of the chairs of the Wisconsin Non-Driver Advisory Committee, it was critical. One of our first acts was to figure out how many non-drivers do we have in Wisconsin, because I had experienced for decades talking with policymakers, and the typical experience was that being a non-driver from their perspective was my problem, not a systems problem. And so, or having our population discounted. Well, there's not very many blind people in the state, right? So, so constantly needing to stand ground to say, this is a systems issue. This is a problem for more than just me. And so that act of figuring out how many people in Wisconsin are non-drivers, but then to go further and show where those non-drivers are. So through our work with the Wisconsin Department of Transportation, we were able to develop an ARC-GIS, which is a very fancy interactive mapping tool for those of you that might not know what that is. For the engineers in the room, you can nerd out to an ARC-GIS all you want. So it's a beautiful tool because we can pull up based on driver records and who owns cars and who has driver's licenses, who doesn't, and then census data, and look at where, oh my goodness, here's where there are all sorts of bus stops, but the people who really need that service are not by those bus stops. And you can see the brokenness throughout the state of our transportation network. And that tool has been powerful. It's where we get that number, 30 to 40% of Dane County residents are non-drivers. As we're talking today, I want to remind us to hold space for our rural community members. So Madison is doing an extraordinary job of creating more and more alternatives. They still don't work for all of us. Christof's words really spoke powerfully. When it gets dark, it's scary. Minding the gap, getting on the bus is a lot. I have enough economic privilege to grab a lift, but not all do. And even when a lift comes, I can't see if it's actually my car that I should be getting into. So we still have issues to work through. But once we leave the boundaries of the city, whether we're on, maybe going to Epic, we can get to Verona, we can get to Sun Prairie. But I have colleagues and friends who live in Stoughton, and Stoughton could be 500,000 miles away, and it's only, it's less than 30. So we still have to figure out how in the world we are going to create connectivity and real options for our rural community.
Well, thank you. That was a great way to begin our conversation. I want to build off on all these talking points, and Denise, you've kind of addressed this, but my kind of since you have the microphone, I want to kind of have you continue talking about how the book points out the number of that non-drivers are everywhere. That's chapter 1. I kind of want to go through in kind of the chapters. That'll kind of help segment our conversation here. But again, who are the people in our in our community who are non-drivers, and what should people understand about their daily experiences? If you can expand a little bit more on that point.
Absolutely, thanks, Gil. So being a non-driver is both an issue of day-to-day activities, and it is an issue of the trajectory of our lives. So people who are non-drivers are everywhere. I think often when folks think of non-drivers, they think of people with disabilities and they think of elders. And certainly we are major groups of non-drivers. Included in the non-driver population are folks who don't drive because of income. We are seeing an increased number of folks who don't drive who are young adults. My 24-year-old is like, I do not want to operate a big steel box. And I don't feel that it's really a thing to do that is right for me and is right for the world. So she could drive, she chooses not to drive. Our older adults, people outlive their driving careers by about 7 to 10 years. Talking with a couple in rural Door County, he does not drive, she still drives. They are 5 miles from the stop point of specialized transportation coming out of Sturgeon Bay. So they have no ride. Once she stops driving, how will they get their groceries? How will they get to their doctor's appointments? Will they need to leave their beautiful Door County home and move to a place where they have closer proximity to amenities? Folks choose not to drive, for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's environmental, sometimes it's ethical. So those are legitimate non-drivers as well. And then there are folks, we know, I think even through the AARP-GIS, that there's drivers we're missing that aren't counted. So my guess is our 31% statewide is low. So there are folks who only drive part-time. So maybe they drive during the daylight when they feel safe or within a certain radius of their homes, but they don't drive beyond that or at night. Or there are folks who have stopped driving, but who have not yet given up their driver's licenses. Folks hold on to that driver's license and those keys, until they're white knuckle, because they know what a powerful thing it is to let go of them and not drive anymore. And our non-drivers are also folks that are undocumented. So it's a much bigger population than I think folks are really aware.
Yeah, we pass the microphone down to Darrin. We're going to have you kind of stem off of what Denise mentioned. As life expectancy continues to increase, as you kind of touched on in the beginning, how this is affecting people's ability to drive safely. And I kind of want to have you address the, maybe from AARP perspective, and also your work on different committees, commissions, helping individuals age in place.
Sure, thank you. AARP takes the position that older adults are multidimensional. Just because you're older doesn't mean you are one thing, or just because you have limited ability to do something doesn't mean that defines you. And I think about, we had an event in La Crosse, and it was a dinner, and it had about 16 people, and people from every decade. And we were waiting, one of the participants was late. It was Rose, and Rose was 92. And it was late because Rose didn't drive at night anymore. Now she drove during the day, as you said, but she didn't drive at night because she wasn't confident in her eyesight. And so she was waiting for a ride, and the ride was late. And so, but Rose arrived. And then over dinner, she was sitting next to me, and I found out that Rose was getting ready to go on a hiking excursion in the Andes Mountains for 10 days. So, you know, here's a woman that can drive at night, but she's gonna go hike in the Andes Mountains. And so, you know, the first thing we always say is, we have this phrase called disrupt aging. You know, let's disrupt our thoughts about aging and what it is, and recognize that anybody, but you know, we focus on older adults, are multidimensional. And so with that in mind, we always like to bring awareness to think about and prepare for as best as you possibly can. My area in community outreach really is in housing and transportation and housing options. And in doing so, just thinking about what it looks like, you know, as you grow older in your home. Number one, is your home safe for you to grow older? Is it filled with a lot of stairs? Is that going to be an issue possibly as you grow older? But then also where it's located. And as Denise mentioned, for the folks in rural communities, that is a real challenge. And I've seen it personally. You know, my wife grew up in a farming family in Ohio. And as her relatives got older, I mean, they're on farms, they're out in the middle of nowhere. And then as they get older, that's no longer an option for them anymore, because it's just completely isolated. And so then they have to move into, you know, into town, into a smaller home. And so we run a couple advocacy programs and work with local outreach to begin having people think about that. We do walk audits in the community and bike audits now. And when we're working with the local community to set that up, we encourage them to make sure older adults are in there, people who are differently abled, and we want to, you know, have that experience because, you know, as someone who can walk wherever I want to go, I oftentimes don't think about what that looks like or what that feels like. And so just being able to walk alongside somebody or move alongside somebody with that experience is powerful. And we learned this through a guest that we had out here in Wisconsin, Jonathan Stalls, and he has a social media presence called Pedestrian Dignity. And, you know, we'd say that oftentimes, you know, pedestrian dignity, okay. And then you start thinking about it, oftentimes being a pedestrian in our society is an undignified way to move about. And we need to just add the basic human dignity to that. And so that's what we, you know, looking at the transportation options that we have, where are people living and how are they located? What are the housing choices that they have? You know, we recognize the challenges in social isolation. There are real physical detriments to being socially isolated. It does affect you socially. And so how do we stay connected and being able to keep you in community? And so that's where all of our outreach is. And that's why I love being vocal about it. Because oftentimes people don't think about it until they're in the throes of it. And we like to just remind them, begin planning as best you can, because a lot of times stuff can happen. You know, maybe it's acutely, maybe, you know, you've hurt yourself and now you're on one of those roller things, you know, with your knee and you can't move around. But, you know, that is not the time. That's when you realize when the challenges are really out there. And so how do we begin being proactive as best we can and being advocates, you know, not being the, no, I don't want to see that in my community, because there might be a time when you're going to need it. And so how do we get behind that and vocalize that?
Hang on the microphone just for another second. Because you talked about you biked over here today and you dressed appropriately for that. So
Probably not high visibility clothing, but it's daylight, so I thought I was safe there.
Actually, I live right on the bike path, and so it's for me, biking here is downhill, so I just coasted the whole way. So that's why I was able to dress up a little bit here. Going back, you'll see me a sweaty mess. But my question kind of comes as I was biking down there, just kind of a gentle rolling by. You know, I was passed by a number of people, but I kind of wanted to touch on one of the things that has changed. You know, kind of a newer technology, electric bikes, and also wheelchairs that have longer battery power. But maybe if you could maybe address, you know, from your experience, how is like electric bikes and other ways enabling people to stay, non-drivers to be more connected to the community.
Yeah, I don't know any of the data statistics on this. Anecdotally, I hear stories, and then we hear stories through AARP about people who had given up riding a bike because it didn't work, but all of a sudden with the advent of electric bikes, now they're able, through less effort, to be able to ride again. Or maybe they always were able to ride their analog bike, but now they can ride further and go do errands on their electric bike that they couldn't do. We also get requests to say, hey, can we get electric trikes? Because they don't seem to be as prevalent as electric bikes, especially in the rental stuff, in case there's balance stuff. And so I think that is a new form of freedom that people have. And so, if you aren't able to drive your car, don't want to drive your car, that electric bike or the longer battery life on a wheelchair or scooter does enable you to do that. And I moved to Madison 11 years ago, so I'm not from Wisconsin and not from Madison. And the first thing that we fell in love with the city was the trail system, and just being able to get around the city on there. Our kids were all smaller at that time, and I grew up. I'm a Gen Xer. I was one of those feral kids where you had to be home by dark, and quite honestly, my parents never knew where I was throughout the day, and I wanted my kids to be able to experience that. And we lived in a small rural community in Ohio, and I never felt safe because bikers were just not seen. And so the kids didn't get to walk around. But, being here in Madison, because of the trail system, we felt way more comfortable them to begin to explore. Now, I was also one of those parents that at an early age, we did get our kids the iPhones, but that was only because I could have the Find My Phone option on there and know where they were. So the leash was only so long to do that. But I think, with any of that, the ability to extend, your freedom a little bit more, it's powerful in that independence and that agency to get out there. So we encourage that. A couple of years ago, we worked with Wisconsin Bike Fed to do some videos on bicycling safety for older adults on electric bikes, because it is a whole different experience. And we want, we don't want you to get on there and get into trouble. And so just being able to prep yourself a little bit. And we'd love to start doing more, especially now it's become even more popular.
I want to switch to the university. So great. I want to ask, kind of switch to it too. You are responsible working with a younger population, although we are seeing more older adults coming to the university. But how is your experience kind of leading parking and transportation services at large universities shaped your understanding of non-drivers, especially at a university this size with so many students here?
Yeah, I think kind of two things. One, as you mentioned, sort of working with younger populations, definitely seeing younger populations wanting to drive less and less. And so that's been a big part of working with students, is understanding if you're choosing not to drive or choosing not to get your driver's license, how are we going to work with you to get you to classes and make sure that you can also get to the other activities that you need to do throughout your day. I think the University of Wisconsin is interesting because we have a lot of policy and environmental barriers for people that are needing to drive to campus. We actually only have about 50% of the population at the university that do drive. Some of the policies that are in place for that is students aren't able to apply for parking on campus and are encouraged not to drive to campus. They're encouraged to live on campus if they can, or access campus through transit or biking or other modes. But that's been a really interesting experience, coming and having conversations with students, because understanding what their transportation needs are, because we're having a policy in place that makes it the driving is not an option for them, has really helped us understand a lot around what that experience is for them when they need access to transportation and mobility, how to make that more convenient for them. I think one of the most interesting things has been even just students that are in the dorms on campus. University of Wisconsin is a very large campus, and we have obviously winter weather summers here are hot, and so people even wanting to walk across campus during the middle of the day, even though it's not that long of a walk, is a bit of a challenge. And so having conversations with people about what options are available to them. So that's been a big piece of it. The other piece of that from the environmental perspective is the university is actually capped at having 13,000 parking stalls on campus. We have over 75,000 people who are coming to campus each day. And so that's been a big part of developing programming and policies to support other transportation modes on campus. The university helps fund a number of Madison Metro routes to support campus. We have an accessible shuttle on campus to help support that. We have partnerships with B-Cycle. So having sort of that policy and requirement to get people here by different modes has helped us develop different types of programming as well.
Yeah, well, that segues into our next segment on infrastructure. So when we think about non-drivers, we're not talking about just one group. We're talking about older adults, young people, people with disabilities, people who simply choose not to drive. And that connects directly to our infrastructure that either helps or hinders people's ability to get around. For example, what I really kind of struck me in the book was the author's use of talking about sidewalks as this network of sidewalks for getting around. That is something I'm starting to use now when I describe the importance of sidewalks, especially in District 11. But I want to kind of switch, get Christof here. He's been kind of neglected you there for a little bit. The chapters 2 and 3 really talk about what drivers need. What non-drivers need.
You talked a lot about what driving.
Yeah, always talking about. I made the same mistake one time. I said week without biking. Let's see. Thanks for catching me on. So chapter 2 is what non-drivers need. And then also chapter 3 is non-drivers need what everyone needs. So I want to ask Christof, how does our transportation system? I know you're new to Madison, but you've had a lot of experience working with other cities. But how does our transportation system, things like sidewalks, crosswalks, bus routes, how does that shape the experience of non-drivers?
It is. We often talk about transportation as an individual choice, and I think that's a very bad way to think about it. I hate the messaging around save the planet, take the bus kind of messaging, because the reality is most people who don't take the bus are not taking the bus simply because it is not a good option for them. And we are making a series of decisions about the world we build. We make decisions about how we use that precious public right of way, what we do in each street, and what we use that space for. We make decisions about what kind of services we operate. And then we make decisions about land use. We do zoning that says this is what you are allowed to build here. This is how many people literally are allowed to live next to the BRT. Those are decisions we are making at a policymaking level. And together, we are deciding what options every individual person has. We're also doing all of this within a set of constraints, and the two biggest ones usually are money and space. I think money is the obvious one. If we had double the transit budget, we could have a whole lot better transit system. And I can tell you our planners are doing the best with the budget they have, but more service is always better. And if we had more money, we could build more facilities more quickly, and we'd be talking less about prioritizing and more about let's do it all right now. But that's only one of the constraints. The other is actually space, that public right of way, what can we fit in a street? And if I were to go to the public on any given street in Madison and start asking people, what do you want this street to include? People would say we want traffic lanes, people would say we want parking, they'd say we want bike lanes, they say we want transit lanes, they'd say we want a sidewalk, they'd say we want street trees. I would take all those things and add them up, and they'd probably add up to twice the space we actually have. And at that point, we start having to make decisions about trade-offs and what is most important to us. And there's two ways I tend to think about that. One is the minimum. Like, what is the minimum acceptable thing? And my favorite example of that is with cars. We decided a long time ago that the minimum is that streets and cities are paved. We are not going to do a cost effectiveness evaluation on whether this street deserves pavement. If it's a street, we pave it. We haven't gotten to similar minimums on other things. You will be very hard pressed to find a US city in which every street has a sidewalk. You'd be very hard pressed to find a US city in which every bus stop has a shelter. You'd be very hard pressed to find a US city in which every bus stop is accessible to somebody in a wheelchair. So I think we have to reset what our minimums are. And then we also have to think about what networks we are creating. What are the backbones of all of those networks? And every city has a major thoroughfare plan, which tells us what the backbones of our car transportation network are. Our bike network needs similar backbones. Our pedestrian network needs backbones. Our transit network needs backbones. And we need to plan those networks so they actually tie the city together. And what's been happening is 50 years ago, those choices were all being made car first. Now we are trying to come back in and reset that and say, no, actually our streets have to work for everyone. And that's hard because, first of all, we are literally resetting. We are taking a right-of-way that was allocated in the past and saying those past decisions might not make sense anymore, but guess what, it's hard. It means people are giving up things when we are resetting that. And we only have so fast a speed we can move at because we are limited by that funding. We can't redo everything. And so we're always in this exercise of prioritizing. And that's really hard decision making. And frankly, we can't do it well unless we have good data and we have good perspectives from the public and a good understanding of what people need. And unless the public is there in the discussion with the political support, because change is always hard.
No, excellent. I think that's, I mean, I think your points get very true. I mean, we have, it would be, we wouldn't think about having a street that just suddenly stops. People have to figure out a way to get, but yet that's perfectly acceptable with the sidewalk. I think by starting to get more voices at the table, to kind of point out that there are signs that like very, small barriers that prevent somebody from getting to that, to the bus stop. And then I think the author also talked about, how the bus shelters that don't have trees. I think this is one example where sometimes you can get a lot. The bus shelters that don't have trees, you see a lower number of people riding buses when it's really, really hot out. So
yeah.
So sometimes you can get the street trees and the buses, and you can get the connecting sidewalk there. I want to be mindful of our time. I guess we're 10 minutes. So I want to just kind of I'm going to jump ahead here to our next segment. And this actually kind of relates to something, Christof, you just said about the this book also challenges elected officials to see beyond the car. And I'd like to kind of start to wind down our discussion with closing about kind of discussion about why that matters. And I guess I want to, and again, as the elected officials sitting up here, we oftentimes hear the loudest voices. And I think sometimes the loudest voices are those who drive. And I think that's one thing that, I think one reason why I would gravitate to this book is that it was directed towards getting non-drivers to kind of get on the same page, to begin to and to have a voice. And I kind of want to wind up our discussion talking about that. And I could maybe kind of go back maybe to Darrin if I could. The author writes, that ultimately it's the elected officials who set priorities and make fund decisions. but by elevating the voices of non-drivers, we can reshape how policies and budgets reflect the needs of the entire community. Now, you served on the Transportation Commission. You now serve on the Plan Commission. The author notes that for some non-drivers, reliable transit or paratransit can make the difference between staying in their community or moving to an institution like a nursing home. What steps does like AARP take to help people age in place and remain an active member of our community?
Thanks, Bill. I talked before about our advocacy, and a lot of that is advocacy through showing. We have our dedicated walk audit program where we work with communities around the state to get a collection of community members. And we do encourage the elected officials to attend these walk audits because we need them to walk along as they're making these decisions to experience with that. We can zip past something in our car and not pay any attention to it. But we walk past it and all of a sudden it becomes a whole different perspective and a whole different feel. Especially with getting back to the whole pedestrian dignity stuff. Our buses are along major backbones, in transportation. But walking along those major backbones, when oftentimes there isn't separate, you're on a sidewalk, but boy, those cars are flying past you just a few feet from you. How does that feel? Like, you drive in your car, you don't feel it. But now let's talk about the policy aspects of it when you are walking there. And then, we've had the luxury of doing it, many times when it's nice outside. We also encourage, and we'll get out there and walk in the middle of winter. What happens when streets are plowed, but the crosswalks aren't, or the intersections aren't? How do you get across? Now, if you are able to lift your legs over that, you still might get wet. But what if you're in a mobility device? Or what if you can't see real well and notice that it's there? Like, what does that create for your trip? And we sometimes get pushback and from folks that I don't have the time for this. And we always encourage them that we do need. And so that's when we pull our advocacy piece in and reach out to our members in the area and encourage your local elected official to attend this, and to be able to experience it. And I think that has been some of the most powerful stuff. We've also weighed in, it's no secret that AARP is a huge advocacy organization. We're here to talk about Social Security and Medicare, and they do all that well. And we're just starting to get into the local advocacy, and I'm building that in Madison and La Crosse and Appleton as some of the communities that I'm working in. And it's encouraging to see our local members who really do want to go ahead and be that advocate for what's happening. And we do a lot of education on the front end there. We don't just say, hey, contact your local official, elected official, because we share with you a series of multiple weeks leading up to that about why AARP supports this. This is what we're seeing now across the country in our experience over the decades. And here's why we think that you should go ahead and contact your local elected official. And that's been really helpful. We've had some pretty good wins, both in transportation and in housing stuff.
Chapter 4 is valuing the expertise of non-drivers. I kind of want to turn to Denise on this one. So you describe some of your work and all the number of committees and boards that you serve on. What do you do to help educate elected officials to kind of understand what it's like to be a non-driver?
Yeah, I think the non-driver voice is critical, and in larger numbers. I mean, it's really even powerful to notice today that while my fellow panelists can choose to not drive, I cannot drive. So that we're often still a minority voice, and sometimes our expertise isn't valued. Many of the circles that I travel in, it is, and I'm grateful for that. And I use my voice to speak for folks who travel in circles where their voices aren't acknowledged. So first, my invitation always is to understand that we bring lived experience that's very powerful. We know what it's like when the light timing is too short and we can't cross fast enough before the light starts to change, and we either get stuck on a pedestrian island in the middle of East Washington, hoping we don't die, Or we run, madly to get across. We know that as a lived experience. We know what it's like to wait at a bus stop that's not protected in a hailstorm. Where else do you go? So those are the experiences that we know really, really well. And I find that non-drivers, people with disabilities, older adults, we're some of the best problem solvers on the planet because we have to be in order to get to work, to get our groceries, to do the things that are required. So at the Wisconsin Council of the Blind and Visually Impaired, advocacy is central to our work. So, often when I sit down with a lawmaker in our state legislature, one of the first questions I ask them is, anybody in your life a non-driver? Because I want to humanize the issue right from the get-go. So I saw one recently who said, yes. And a couple of them have gotten teary as they've talked about moms or dads or siblings, or themselves, and their inability to drive or changing ability to drive. So humanizing the issue is really, really critical. And then from that, we can now develop common ground. All of us want to be safe. So if we can talk about this as a safety and an access issue, you want to get your groceries and come home and be able to put them away, as do I. So the numbers, the data is all super, super important. It supports the humanness of the story. So my invitation always to non-drivers is your story is valuable. Tell it loud, tell it proud, and find the people who will listen to it. We need representation too. I'm so proud to serve on the city's Transportation Commission. And when I first joined, I was the only person with disability on that commission. So it also felt like a giant burden to be carrying all the people on my back. And it is really exciting to see more folks with disability, other non-drivers, other folks who, if I'm not there, there were nights that I'm like, oh God, I'm so tired, I can't go to Transportation Commission, but who will speak for the people? And that is shifting, and that is exciting. That sometimes I'm not even the first one to bring something up. And so I'm so proud of my fellow transportation commissioners for helping to carry the water. So thank you for that. It's very powerful. So yeah, and we got to keep the pressure on, as we are facing whatever is going to happen and the tough decisions are made. How are we making sure we keep our thumb on the pulse to keep bringing these issues up and to be creating the dialogue, the narrative of what it is that we want, even when times are tough, so that when we get to whatever another side is going to be, we have a vision for the future. So that's, as I listen to my fellow panelists, I'm like, yep, there's vision here. And it's exciting because we need to keep that alive as we're moving through hard times. So keep telling the story. And then for folks to listen to the story, there's truth, there's heart in what you're hearing from non-drivers.
Well, thank you. We're just about out of time, but what always intrigues me and why I do these events is just the power of books and how books influence politics. It's been that way for hundreds, thousands of years. I mean, what I like about this book in particular, this is that the author has not only a call to action at the end, but also cites their sources. And that to me, it really speaks to kind of the author's intent, why they wrote this book, and it's to get more people, again, on the same page, to get engaged. And I kind of want to kind of wind up our discussion here with kind of a call to action for our panelists here. Kind of what the author asked, what is one thing that you can do right now to build communities that are better for non-drivers? If we just maybe take a minute and just go down the line. Denise, you have your microphone. Why don't you start off?
Sure, I'll kick it off. I'll do this work until I can't do it anymore. It's really that vital, and to also see that interconnectedness. Christof mentioned it, Darrin did as well. that really the needs of non-drivers exist in an ecosystem. And so understanding and speaking about that big picture, housing, services, where we build hospitals, where we build clinics. So I'll keep doing the work until I can't do it anymore. And I'll also make a plug that Wednesday, we move into October, which is Pedestrian Safety Month. So I want to invite you to our website, wcblind.org, wcblind.org. We just published a pedestrian safety month toolkit, which is designed for advocates and also folks in the public policy space on making our communities walkable, rollable, and bikeable for all users.
I think as a professional in a position of power, the reminder for myself is fundamentally always to listen, to think about all of the people who these systems serve, to think about all of those perspectives, to always be open to new ideas. I remember once we were doing a project in Houston talking about walkability, and somebody said, my biggest walkability problem is stray dogs. And that's not something that had ever occurred to me before. It's like, okay, it's a whole new policy area we need to explore. And that kind of open-mindedness and that kind of realizing that when we are sitting at the city and drawing a drawing of a street, we are making decisions that determine the lives of the people who live on that street, who work on that street, who do business on that street, who pass through that street for decades to come. And we need to make those choices intelligently, and we make those choices intelligently by listening. And then for all of you in the audience, be the voices we are listening to. I think often the hardest thing, the thing that is most holding us back is people not speaking up, because some people will always be heard. We need everybody else to be heard as well. And it's remarkable to me in the transportation space how few voices it can take to really cause change. I remember once in Houston Metro, we created a bus route because 2 people showed up to the board to talk about it. And if you are not one of the people showing up, you are not one of those voices that's shaping the world. So for all of you out there, take every advantage of every voice you have and help us make the right decisions.
I think kind of to what Christof was saying, I think really thinking about there's a difference between planning on paper and planning in reality. And so one of the things when I worked for a transit agency in the Puget Sound region, we used to do was actually we made it mandatory for our transit planners to once a quarter to go out and actually ride the routes that they were planning on, so that they had that experience, could sit at a bus shelter, could see what the experience of the ride was, understand how long it took, that kind of thing. And that's something that I've started to institute here too at the University of Wisconsin. It's with my team, is to actually get them out using the different modes that get you to campus. And so I think that's really key. But I think also to Christof's point, that experience is still different than the experience of people who are involuntary non-drivers who live this day to day. And so really being able to have those conversations with us. And I think part of our job too as policymakers is to meet people where they're at. So not always be in boardrooms, but also be out having conversations with people where we can.
Thank you. I always tell folks that the more powerful message comes from you. I can sit there and I can talk to a group and tell them why we support something. But when you are talking to neighbors, when you are talking to family members, as you see something that isn't right and pointing it out, it is powerful. We hosted a pedestrian dignity experience a couple of years ago with seniors at Madison West High School, and we just walked around the neighborhood of Madison West, and that's when all the construction was going on. And very quickly the students realized sidewalk access ended without any warning. And if you didn't see it or were with a mobility device, you had to turn around and go back to be able to cross the street. And so, they then voiced the concern to the administration and to the construction company and the city and got it changed. But then my daughter was a senior at the time too. And the students would say, we can't unsee this stuff now. And as we walk around, we see all of this stuff. And I point out to my mom or my dad, hey, did you realize that this is happening here? Or did you think about somebody who isn't able to just turn around and look like you go? And so I think, those stories, are so powerful. And so, talk to your family and talk to your friends when you see it and your neighbors, because that's what's gonna help change their mind, or at least make them aware, more so than anybody else talking it.
Well, thank you. I want to give our panel a round of applause for joining us tonight. And now it's your opportunity to ask questions. So I'm going to play Phil Donahue for those of you who are over 15 that I'm talking about.
Want me to run the mic for you?
Oh, I can do it. This is how I get my steps in. Let's see, I'll start with you.
Prior to coming here, I was at a climate rally down on campus. And one of the objects of the rally was to inform the public about this lawsuit that's been filed by 15 young people in the Dane County District Court. And it concerns the power sector with the Wisconsin legislature and the Wisconsin Power Commission. And they're saying you're not paying attention to the ongoing climate change, and you're actually favoring fossil fuel. They could actually make the transportation sector another side of this. Transportation in the United States represents 28% of the greenhouse emissions. And the young people realize that this can't go on. And it seems like what the theme is what we're talking about today, is how slow this happens. But climate change is not a slow process. In fact, we're speeding it up as we grow the transportation sector, particularly flights. 17 million people in the United States flew over the Labor Day holiday. Every year it's bigger than it was the year before. And what I wonder is, when will we finally address the fact that bigger cars and continuing this thing, and I've done some street side signing with my climate work, and I would guess that 80% of the cars I see in commutes, single person, one person driving a car. And then I'm trying to get off the cars myself. I'm on a 30-pound bike and I'm going the same place, and I can almost make it down to the square from the 3 miles from my house faster than someone can drive that and then find a parking place, definitely. So it seems like one of the people that aren't being addressed in here are those that have no voice, the 18 and below that don't vote, can't vote, but yet their very future is tied up in what do we do to solve it.
Yeah. So who would like to answer that question? Addressing
I think one thing I will just say is part of it is working to change the mindset. Right now, driving is the automatic assumption of how you get around. And so it's really working to, in institutions, in cities, to really talk about the other modes and how they help to support people to get around. So I think that's part of it. It's part of that mind shift, culture change that needs to happen.
I do think one of our problems sometimes in the transportation world, and frankly in the urban planning world, is we convince ourselves that change isn't possible, and we believe in incrementalism, and we kind of think of our cities as this static thing that we can tweak around the edges, except when we look at history, that's not true. We turned a transit-oriented United States circa 1920 into a car-oriented United States by 1950. And that was massive policy change. That was massive public investment. It was whole new industries being created. And we are capable of that level of change. But this is one of those things where that change has to happen on a national level. It has to happen with great political support, and it has to happen with great intent. And that is ultimately a political question.
We have a question here for Darrin here.
Hi, my name is Cheryl. I was thrilled, Darrin, when you mentioned the recumbent trikes and electric, because I had been on a wheelchair for a long time after having been very athletic for most of my life, but had hip problems, got on a wheelchair, started using public transportation, really learned a lot about that, as Denise has said, seeing this through the eyes of people who cannot drive. But now I still continue to use the bus all the time because I actually like using it with an injured hip. It's much easier for me to step into a bus than to swing my leg up into a minivan. But one of the things that has been a passion for me through this journey is that instead of thinking that when driving is not an option, I've actually worked with women over 50. I've got a meetup group that's grown tremendously for women over 50. We also know the Ethels through AARP. The Ethels definitely like to meet and eat and socialize. But what I have done, and it's a great group, by the way, what I have done is I have tied the bus. Every group that I have get together is near a bus stop, and then I tie movement into the group because it helps build the social connection that you were talking about. So I think other than people who probably sell the fare cards, I feel I've probably converted more women over 50 who said they would never use the bus to use the bus regularly, because I'll meet them, for example, at Target. I said, that's our starting destination. We're going to ride the bus in. We're going to see a gallery at the Chasm, and we're going to come back. We'll meet at Cafe Hollander if anyone wants to learn how to use the bus more. And one of the things I have found for the AARP contingent is that it's not only important that the bus is there, and it's more important when you're working, when time is of the essence, where you have to make it to job or to a doctor's appointment. With people over 50 or people with mobility disorders, often the key driver is, how can I minimize the number of steps I need to take? And so you really have to teach people how to use the bus schedules, whether it's Google Maps, for example, to look up the amount of minutes they'll have to walk, because often they're worried about fall risks. But my meetings, for example, have started there. I've taken people to go downtown to art up the square. I've taken people to go take walks over the Old Bridge. I move the events all around Madison so I can capture people on different bus routes. I hold a how to ride the bus at least once a quarter. When I teach Plato courses for the learning groups over 55 plus, I add in an optional event called how to learn how to use the bus. I mean, I am just so gung-ho on seeing people, and you know what I've seen out of this is I've seen the women in my group come together. They now get that social connection that has been missing in their life. You get widowed, you get divorced, you become a caregiver, you have a spouse with dementia, all these things. If you can find a respite period to go and take a trip with someone on the bus, I guess it's not really a question, but I really came here today to say, you got to sell the bus. And to sell the bus, it's not because you always need the bus, it's because it enriches your life. And that's how I'd like to close with it.
Thank you. I would just say, I agree with you 100%, and I would love to speak to you afterwards. Okay, we have.
Thanks.
Gentlemen here, then you're next to we have about 10 minutes, so just ask if.
I think Denise had something.
Yeah, I want to pick up on what you said because it is really critical. I think that part of how that shift that that we've talked about from being a transit focused to a car focused, part of that transition, what was sold to the American people is that transit is yucky, that it is something that only undesirable people take, and that you don't want to be there. And it was a very deliberate narrative to help drive people to cars. And so it is really incumbent on us to change that narrative. I love the bus. You know, when I have ridden it for, periods of time, going to a specific work, location, I made friends on the bus. You know, they were, as I was leaving to do a new career, the ladies on the bus, and they signed the card, gave it to me to wish me well for that next transition. You know, that it is a slice of life, and there is relationships that are built on the bus. So yes, I'm so grateful for the work that you're doing, and that is part of our work, is how do we change that narrative from it being yucky and undesirable to being a place of potential social connection. And for our older adults who might use specialized transportation or human services transportation, that transportation driver is a lifeline for them. It may be the only person that they talk to in a 2 to 3 week period, and they build relationship, and they have someone who gets them, who pays attention to them, who helps them know that they are worthy. So thank you for your work. I really appreciate that.
Okay, we just have a couple of minutes left. Quick question.
Sure. For Denise, you mentioned working with state legislators. Have you had any like particular difficulties along party lines, or like with that kind of myth busting of like getting that refocus of like, okay, transportation actually enriches people, or just any difficulties in general, like communicating that message to the people in power?
Yeah, I have. So, in talking across party lines and starting to humanize it, that's been very helpful, because being a non-driver doesn't know if you have an R or a D after your name. And so bringing it to that human level has been really an important shift, where we see, and I get commitments from both sides of the aisle about things that they'll move forward through the state budget process. But then what happens in that last hour, as deals are being struck, is guess what gets thrown out the window? So we're further along than we have been, because now there's the conversations are happening, and they're coming from a heart place as well as a head place. But transportation is still the easy giveaway when we're cutting the deal at the last minute for the budget.
Okay, we have time for one last question.
They answered it.
You already got it? Okay. Okay, well then,
Way to back there.
oh, there we go, way back here. Definitely getting my steps in. And just let us know which panelist you're addressing this to.
We have, there's two main apps I use to see when the bus is coming. There's Google Maps, and then there's a beautiful transit app. Google Map will tell you that the bus left 5 minutes before it arrived, and then you're having a panic attack for those 5 minutes. I think with selling the bus, is it anything you're doing or plan to do to sell this bus app? Like, it's called Transit. It's amazing.
It's called.
You've actually identified one of my frustrations right now. So I think this is actually, first of all, a bigger point. One of the really important things that we don't talk enough about in transportation is making things legible. Because the first time user of a bus, the person who's just trying biking for the first time, the person who's walking in a city that they haven't walked in before, we need to make it easy to understand, because otherwise people are just going to give up. Now, on this specific instance, the under the hood thing of telling you when the next bus is coming, first of all, relies on a bunch of tech on the buses that is brand new tech that has just been installed in the last couple of years with a vendor, with software backing up, and there's some issues there. We're trying to work through those issues, especially when buses are on detours. The system tends to not give accurate times, which is a huge frustration. We're talking to our vendor, we're telling them this is not how it's supposed to work. I've been in a bunch of meetings on that one already. But on top of that, the different apps are giving you different information, partially because they're all doing their own estimation. And this is actually one of those things that is remarkably hard to estimate. Your bus may be 2 minutes away, but then it hits a traffic signal and it's not 2 minutes away. It hits a stop where there's 15 people waiting, and that boarding time takes longer than expected, and it's not 2 minutes away. And what you'll see is Apple and Google and transit are all running their own algorithms to try to estimate what's going to happen. So they're giving you somewhat different numbers. And then on top of that, you have buses that aren't on the system or a bus that got entered as being on the wrong schedule. I promise you, we are paying attention to this stuff and thinking about all of the points where it isn't going right and thinking about what we need to do to fix that. Because to me, the worst feeling in the world is waiting at a bus stop and suddenly having that feeling in the pit of your stomach of my bus isn't coming and I'm not going to be able to get there. And it is our job for you never to have that.
Well, I want to thank our panelists for being here with us this afternoon. I want to thank our online viewers. I especially want to thank those of you who came in on a gorgeous day to come inside. And I want to also encourage all of you to carry on this conversation, keep it moving, to talk with your neighbors, talk with policymakers, and also to think about your transportation choices and communicate that with others. You know, as a politician, I will say, you know, we need to hear from as many voices as possible to make informed decisions. And I think, you know, and more of us need to get out there and put ourselves in situations where we are engaging with people who normally would be quiet on these issues. And I think that's where I see this book is just, and this week without driving as just the beginning of what will become more and more conversations and probably larger and larger groups of us talking in the future. Well, that's all my part. I'm going to turn it over to Leah to kind of wrap things up. So thank you.
Yeah, so I just have a couple of things to leave you with here. So as we mentioned before, this is the kickoff of this panel discussion series for Week Without Driving. So we have 2 more events coming up. Both will be held hybrid. So you're welcome to register for these and join online or come join us in person Tuesday in Sun Prairie and Thursday in Fitchburg. There will be different panelists, different discussions. So, you know, we're encouraging people to come to all 3 and really, you know, we'll have a really rich conversation throughout this week. And then this is the website you can go to check out more if you want to learn more about the Week Without Driving, the challenge to participate yourself. This is something, you know, raising awareness through social media. If you are a non-driver, taking this as an opportunity to share some of your experiences. If you are a driver and you want to say, hey, I'm taking this challenge during the week, here's what I'm experiencing, here's what's, you know, some light bulb moments for me, we'd encourage you to do that. And then you can check out the Greater Madison MPO website. So it's greatermadisonmpo.org. We'll have this video posted. We'll share that with everyone who's put their contact info in on the registration sheet. And we have all of the information about, you know, what's happening this week on the website as well. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. Let's give another round of applause to our fantastic a wonderful evening. Thank you.